Darkvision. What does it really mean? What does vision, light, the blinded condition, all that, how does it work in 5th edition? This actually came up a bunch in my Discord about people asking, how does it work? And there seemed to be a lot of confusion also in some YouTube comments. So I thought it would be a good idea to go over all of that. So if you want to see how Darkvision and all of that works in 5e, stay tuned. I was trying to think of a good Call of Duty pun, but actually I can't see anything because I don't have this turned on, so I'm actually completely blind. What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here. We're going to go ahead and put Soap over here in the background, and we'll put his night vision goggles on. Let those hang out in the background there. So let's jump over to D&D Beyond to talk about how vision and light sources and things like that work in 5e. Well, I'm still in the corner from the D&D Beyond dice video. So, in the Player's Handbook, under Chapter 8, the Adventuring section, there is, under the Environment subsection, there is a further subsection called Vision and Light. And that's really where you want to go to get all your information. The most fundamental tasks of adventuring, noticing danger, finding hidden objects, hitting an enemy in combat, and targeting a spell, to name just a few, rely heavily on a character's ability to see. Darkness and other effects that obscure vision can prove a significant hindrance. So, okay. A given area may be lightly or heavily obscured, and that's the big key point there. In a lightly obscured area, such as dim light, patchy fog, or moderate foliage, creatures have disadvantage on perception checks that rely on sight. So, as it states there, at any area that is considered lightly obscured, dim light, fog, and so on, perception checks have disadvantage. Now, attack rolls and other things do not have disadvantage. It's just trying to see things. So the biggest point of that would be more, I would say, hiding, right? So if you are going to hide, if it's an area full of light patchy fog, the area is lightly obscured. So if you're trying to hide from someone, like by hiding in the fog, then that would come into effect. The person trying to see you would have disadvantage on their perception check to see you. Now, if you're making noise, they don't have disadvantage on their checks to hear you. They can still hear you. Also, if you have disadvantage on a check, that gives you a -5 on the passive version. So if someone's not actively looking for you while you're sneaking around and you're using their passive perception, if they're in an area that is lightly obscured, their passive perception is going to be at a -5. The big one that comes into effect here is a heavily obscured area, such as darkness, opaque fog, or dense foliage, blocks vision entirely. A creature effectively suffers from the blinded condition when trying to see something in that area. When presence or absence of light in an environment creates 3 categories of illumination: bright light, dim light, and darkness. So let's go look at the blinded condition. A blinded creature cannot see and automatically fails any ability check that requires sight. Attack rolls against that creature have disadvantage, attack rolls against that creature have advantage, and the creature's attack rolls have disadvantage. That makes plenty of sense, I think. So you can't see, therefore people attacking you that can see you have advantage, and you making outgoing attacks, you have disadvantage because you can't see. So if we jump down here to the light section, a heavily bright light is most effective. Even gloomy days provide bright light, such as do torches, lanterns, fires, and so on. Dim light, also called shadows, creates a lightly obscured area. An area of dim light is usually a boundary between a source of bright light, such as a torch, and surrounding darkness. The soft light of twilight and dawn also counts as dim light. A particularly brilliant full moon will bathe the land in dim light, giving everybody that doesn't have access to certain abilities disadvantage on perception checks. And then darkness creates a heavily obscured area. Characters face darkness outdoors at night, even on most moonlit nights, within the confines of an unlit dungeon or a subterranean vault, or in an area of magical darkness. Now, it doesn't really make sense to talk about blind sight too much as we're discussing Darkvision, but it's right here, so I thought I'd mention it. So it says you can perceive kind of your surroundings without sight within a specific radius. Creatures without eyes, such as oozes, people with echolocation, bats, tree dragons, etc., can use blindsight. So the way that works is, I guess the best example would be Daredevil from Marvel Comics, right? He doesn't actually see things, he kind of senses them with his like increased hearing kind of perception abilities. So dragons, for example, can see out of their eyes, but they can also sense. Things like oozes will have blind sight, but it will say like their blind sight range is 15 feet, but they are whatever it is. I'm making that up, but let's say it's 15 feet. They are blind beyond that. For example, a bat has echolocation-based blind sight out to, I think, 30 feet. So they can see, but in theory, they also have eyesight as well. So there are ways you can have both versions. But the main point of this was Darkvision. And let's talk about it. Many creatures in fantasy gaming worlds, especially those that dwell underground, have Darkvision. Within a specified range, a creature with dark vision can see in dim light as if it were bright light, and in darkness as if it were dim light. So areas of darkness are only lightly obscured as far as that creature is concerned. However, that creature can't discern color in that darkness, only shades of gray. So this is sort of the reason that I'm making this video, is just my general, and I'm guilty of this myself, so I won't fault anybody for doing this. A lot of people treat Darkvision in 5e just as like the catch-all, like you can just see in the dark and it's no different, it's just like in black and white. And technically that's not correct. It basically steps things up a stage, right? So in bright light, everybody can see just fine, no problems. In dim light, shadowy kind of scenarios that are considered lightly obscured, everybody has disadvantage on perception checks. In darkness, it is considered heavily obscured, which provides the blinded condition, which basically means you effectively cannot see, as we discussed before. You effectively can't see. Attack rolls against you have advantage, and your attack rolls have disadvantage. Okay? So there's that. Now, when you have dark vision, you treat areas of darkness as if it were dim light, and areas of dim light as if it were bright light. So in a shadowy scenario, right, as it states up here, now remember, this is only in regards to light, not in regard to heavily or lightly obscured. So, right, dark vision doesn't provide you any benefit in fog, in foliage, any of that kind of thing. But if you are in a dim, shadowy scenario, like they said, the boundary between like a bright source of light, like a torch, I think a torch is 30 foot of bright light, 30 foot of dim light. So if you're beyond that 30 feet, it's dim light. You don't suffer any downsides. And then if you are in complete and utter darkness, you have disadvantage on perception checks. But other than that, everything works okay. So you can still attack normally without any issue. But if you're searching for something, looking for something in the dark, you still have disadvantage on your perception checks. So that could potentially be a huge setup. Again, as I stated earlier, you're trying to find someone hidden. That's a -5 on your passive perception check. That's disadvantage on an active perception check. So it has downsides. But one thing I also feel like is missed on this a lot of the time is going the other way. I have dark vision, and I'm fighting somebody who's in the dark. They are blinded if they don't have a light source. If they're just like standing watch, well, I don't know why you would do this, right? Stand watch. I mean, maybe you're outside under the night sky, and it's not a particularly bright full moon, as it states here. You're outside standing watch, just like looking off, and you don't have a torch or a light source near you. Again, questionable decisions all around. But let's say you do that. You are blinded, effectively. Your attack rolls against me have disadvantage, and all my attack rolls against you have advantage. I don't even need to be hidden. I could be out in the middle of the road, and let's say like you're up on a palisade wall, and it's a moonlit night, and I'm out in the middle of the road, and it's considered dark, and you don't have dark vision. I could be walking up and down that road as long as I'm not making noise to alert you to my presence. You can't see me because it's technically heavily obscured, and you are blinded. Therefore, I have advantage on attack rolls against you, even if I'm not in the open and not actually hidden. So I think that part often gets negated too, and I mean, maybe it's because people find ways to get dark vision, but in that respect, dark vision is actually very powerful. In an area of darkness, you are considered blinded, and attack rolls against you have advantage. This goes even crazy further if you get access to certain things that certain races or classes or magic items might give you, where you have the ability to see through magical darkness. So it doesn't really cover it here, but magical darkness obviously beats dark vision. It is a supernatural dark, like the darkness spell, for example. But if you can see through magical darkness, it is a huge benefit to you, because you now have, if you are in the area of magical darkness, you have advantage on attack rolls against anybody outside or even within the darkness, because you can see perfectly fine, and they have disadvantage on attack rolls against you. So that's something to consider, right? Dropping a globe of darkness on yourself while you can see out of it provides basically every incoming attack against you disadvantage. It's effectively making you invisible, but you can attack out of it just fine because you can see out of it. So it serves a purpose as like a defensive tool. It can also be used as an offensive tool. Also to consider, if you have blindsight, the ability, magical darkness doesn't affect you either. You can still sense people, so you could drop darkness or go wade into darkness, and blindsight doesn't matter, or magical darkness doesn't matter to you either. So my point that I wanted to make with this video was dark vision doesn't just turn off all the negatives of being in the dark without a light source. You can see in magical darkness, which would otherwise be considered heavily obscured to everybody else, meaning they are blind. You can see as though it was dim light, so you can still attack and cast spells and everything with no downside, but your perception checks are at disadvantage. And then you treat areas of dim light, wherever those come up, as just regular, and then obviously bright light is bright light. There's no issue there. But that is something I feel like everybody, and if you have a party of everyone with dark vision, no one ever brings a light source, because they're like, oh, we can all just see in the dark. But as I stated, you could do something where it's a color-based trap, where they can see as shades of gray, so they can't hit the thing unless they use a light source. Or if they're trying to find something specific, unless they roll very well, their perception checks do still have disadvantage, so they may miss what they're looking for because they're choosing to not bring in a light source. So there is still a reason to do so. And the amount of times that I have seen either run a game, or possibly even done this myself, where somebody has dark vision and somebody doesn't, and the person who doesn't like puts their hand on the shoulder of the person with dark vision, and that person sort of guides them through the area, but because they don't want to strike like a match or do a light source. But effectively, that person is blinded, and there's, again, a lot more downside to that I feel like get brought up when people are discussing darkness. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the games you're in, your DM runs it as it's written, but in my experience from watching a lot of streamed games, from playing in a lot of games, and from running a lot of games, more often than not, dark vision is just considered as, well, now there's no reason for me to bring a source of light in the dark. I'll just do what I want to do. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Did I do a good job of explaining that? I feel like I was circularly talking, but that's kind of what I thought needed to be explained. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Anyway, thank you to my patrons on Patreon for helping to support the channel. I really do appreciate it. We would break 50 patrons, which is awesome, which now means I will bring back my It Builds character, pop culture-based character live building stream. I haven't decided exactly when I'm going to do that, what the schedule is going to be, but it will be back, so be on the lookout for that. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, now would be a great time to do so. And also, if you haven't seen my video or my friend Jordan's video regarding Counterspell, there'll be a link to that in the description. We are currently in the midst of a Counterspell war. There are several folks, not just Jordan, out there who have problems with the spell Counterspell, and there's at least 2 to 3 videos out there complaining about how it needs to be fixed, how it's wrong, and all that. And I'm in the camp that, no, it doesn't. It's fine how it is. let's leave it alone. And I made a video about that. So I would love if you could sound off in the comments and say, are you Team Ted or Team Jordan? Team Counterspell or Team Anti-Counterspell or Counterspell, whatever you want to call it. But let me know. I'm curious. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.